How can a paradise like Jamaica, known for its stunning attractions and unforgettable memories, sometimes transform into a tourist's nightmare? While many seek a peaceful escape, what accounts for the unsettling incidents where visitors have been severely harmed? The island's allure remains, but caution is crucial to ensure a dream vacation doesn't turn into regret. Originally from Jamaica, Errol Bennett made Preston, UK his home, where he became a well-known upholsterer and respected figure in the West Indian community. Despite his years away from Jamaica, his heart remained tethered to the island's warmth and beauty. As he reached his late 50s, the relentless pain of arthritis made the English climate unbearable, prompting him to spend extended periods in Hector's River, a serene village in Portland, Jamaica. In December 2011, Errol returned to Jamaica for the winter, eager to enjoy the tropical climate and reconnect with his roots. He looked forward to a special celebration planned for July 2012, when his daughter Zoe would join him for his 60th birthday. However, fate had other plans. During his stay in Hector's River, Errol unknowingly faced a grave threat. His cousin Clifton, who had long struggled with life's hardships, harbored deep resentment toward him. Despite Errol's financial assistance over the years, Clifton felt betrayed and believed he was owed more. On a quiet July morning in 2012, Clifton's simmering anger erupted into violence. Driven by greed and a distorted sense of entitlement, he broke into Errol's villa with a machete. What began as an attempted robbery quickly escalated into a brutal act of violence. Errol, alone in his home, fell victim to Clifton's murderous rage, ending his life in the place where he had sought solace. Shocked and terrified, Errol tried to defend himself, but Clifton's rage was unstoppable. The machete came down with brutal force, slashing through flesh and bone. Errol sustained 15 wounds, each more devastating than the last. Blood stained the floors and walls of the villa, the once serene space now a grim testament to violence and betrayal. Errol fought for his life, but the attack was too severe. Alone and bleeding, he succumbed to his injuries, his life ebbing away in the place he had hoped would bring him peace. Zoe, who had been preparing to visit her father, had her trip canceled at the last minute due to work commitments. It was a twist of fate that saved her life and that of her unborn child. Had she been there, she might have been another victim of Clifton's madness, but instead she was spared, only to be thrust into a nightmare when she received the news. When Zoe arrived in Jamaica, the horror of what had happened hit her full force. She walked into her father's villa and was met with a scene of unimaginable violence. The sight of her father's bloodied body, the evidence of the struggle that had taken place, shattered her. Her worst fears had been realized, and the grief was overwhelming. She had lost her father, and the island that had once been a place of joy and celebration was now tainted with tragedy. The local authorities eventually arrested Clifton in September 2012, but the wheels of justice turned slowly. The trial was delayed multiple times, much to the frustration and anguish of Errol's family. Each adjournment felt like a slap in the face, prolonging their pain and denying them the closure they so desperately needed. The case was adjourned 6 times, and the family's faith in the justice system eroded further with each delay. Years passed, and the legal battle dragged on, with threats and intimidation becoming part of Zoe's daily life. But she refused to back down. She had lost her father in the most brutal way possible, and she was determined to see justice served. Her resolve never wavered, even as the trial became a drawn-out ordeal. Finally, in March 2016, after years of fighting, Zoe secured the justice her father deserved. Clifton was found guilty of Errol's murder and was sentenced to 40 years to life. It was a moment of bittersweet victory for Zoe. She had fought tirelessly to see her father's killer brought to justice, but the victory could not get Errol back. The pain of his loss remained, a constant reminder of the violence that had shattered their lives. Zoe's journey to find justice for her father was long and painful, but she never gave up. Though the years passed and the world moved on, the memory of Errol Bennett and the legacy of love he left behind would never fade. Jamaica's tropical allure promised sun-soaked beaches, vibrant culture, and a taste of paradise, which drew 53-year-old British tourist Timothy Southern from Lichfield, Staffordshire. In May 2022, Timothy arrived at the Royal Decameron Club Caribbean in St. Anne with his family, eager to enjoy the warm climate and the resort's relaxed atmosphere. Their vacation began as anticipated, with days spent swimming and exploring and evenings filled with delicious food, live entertainment, and tropical cocktails. One evening, Timothy joined 2 fellow guests in a drinking challenge to consume all 21 cocktails on the hotel's menu in one sitting. Although Timothy had already been drinking brandy and beer earlier in the day, the challenge's allure was irresistible. The atmosphere was pleasant initially, with the men toasting and enjoying each other's company. Not a habitual heavy drinker, Timothy was caught up in the excitement and festive environment. As the night progressed, Timothy drank 12 of the 21 cocktails. The mix of alcohol, combined with the heat and his earlier drinking, began to overwhelm him. Despite growing discomfort, he continued to partake, caught up in the evening's revelry. The cumulative effects of the alcohol took a toll on his body, though Timothy, immersed in the holiday spirit, barely noticed the creeping discomfort until it became too late. Eventually, Timothy decided he had had enough. The challenge, which had started as a fun diversion, now made him feel unsteady and nauseous. He said his goodbyes and made his way back to his room. The familiar surroundings of the resort now slightly blurred and distorted by the alcohol coursing through his system. His family, unaware of the extent of his drinking, assumed he was just tired from the day's activities and prepared to retire for the night themselves. It wasn't long after he returned to his room that Timothy's condition worsened. What had initially felt like a manageable level of intoxication quickly escalated into something much more severe. His body, overwhelmed by the excessive alcohol, began to rebel. He felt a sharp pain in his stomach, followed by a wave of nausea that left him gasping for breath. Desperate for relief, he tried to force himself to vomit, but his coordination was impaired, and he could feel himself choking. A family member, noticing Timothy's distress, rushed to his aid. They managed to turn him onto his side, placing him in the recovery position in an attempt to prevent him from choking further. Panic set in as they realized the severity of his condition. His skin was cold and clammy, his breathing shallow and labored. They called for help, their voices filled with urgency as they pleaded for someone to summon an ambulance. Minutes ticked by, each one filled with increasing dread as Timothy's condition deteriorated. A nurse eventually arrived, but to the horror of Timothy's family, no ambulance had been called. The nurse, seemingly unsure how to handle the situation, hesitated, prompting the family to urge her to act. Despite their desperate pleas, it was clear that time was running out. The nurse finally began chest compressions, but Timothy's body showed little response. His pulse was weak, his skin now tinged with the coldness of hypothermia. The family's worst fears were confirmed when Timothy was pronounced dead. The cause of death was later determined to be acute gastroenteritis due to alcohol consumption, a stark and clinical explanation for the tragic loss of life that had unfolded in what was supposed to be a place of relaxation and joy. The impact of the night's events left Timothy's family reeling, their vacation forever marred by the senselessness of the situation. In the following days, the Southern family struggled to understand what had happened. They were angry, grief-stricken, and filled with a sense of injustice. They believed that the resort had failed in its duty of care, not only by allowing the drinking challenge to take place, but also by not responding adequately when Timothy's life was in danger. The realization that their travel insurance did not cover the repatriation of Timothy's body only added to their heartbreak, forcing them to start a GoFundMe campaign to bring him back home to the UK. Desiree Gibbon, an adventurous 26-year-old from Queens, New York, was exploring Jamaica in November 2017, staying at her grandmother's hotel in Montego Bay. Known for her roles as a model, aspiring filmmaker, and globetrotter, Desiree had traveled to reconnect with her roots and plan for film school in Europe. Montego Bay's vibrant culture and stunning beaches offered a perfect respite from New York's hustle, blending comfort with opportunity. Desiree immersed herself in local life, seeking a bartending job to fund her dreams while exploring the island's hidden corners. Her openness and enthusiasm brought her into contact with various locals, some welcoming, others potentially dangerous. Despite the allure of island life, areas like Anchovy, just miles from where she stayed, she carried a reputation for danger that Desiree either overlooked or chose to ignore. On November 26, 2017, Desiree seemingly left her grandmother's hotel to meet someone. She never returned, and the following morning, Anchovy residents discovered her body hidden among the bushes. Her throat was slashed, and her face was bruised, revealing a brutal attack. The violence shocked the community, which had a fragile trust in local law enforcement. Despite the grim circumstances, justice seemed elusive in the face of such brutality, and the challenges of investigating crime in a place where safety and trust were already tenuous. Devastated by the news, Desiree's family was left grappling with the unthinkable. How could this happen to her, in a place that was supposed to be safe, surrounded by people she trusted? Her mother, Andrea, was particularly haunted by the thought that her daughter's killer was someone she knew. Desiree had always been careful, aware of the dangers of being a young woman traveling alone. Yet it seemed that her trust had been misplaced, her openness exploited by someone who had gained her confidence only to betray it most horrifically. The investigation into Desiree's murder was slow and frustrating. Jamaican authorities, already stretched thin by the demands of their jobs, struggled to piece together the events leading up to her death. There were no immediate leads, and no suspects were brought in for questioning. The lack of progress fueled rumors and speculation, each theory more disturbing than the last. Some believed it was a crime of passion, driven by jealousy or anger. Others suggested a more calculated motive, perhaps linked to the darker aspects of island life that Desiree had unknowingly brushed up against. Andrea, desperate for answers, remained convinced that her daughter had been lured away from the hotel's safety. The fact that Desiree's purse, money, and identification were missing only reinforced her belief that the attack was premeditated, that someone had targeted her specifically. The idea that Desiree's killer might still be out there, free to harm others, was almost too much to bear. As the weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. Jamaican authorities released few details, citing the ongoing investigation, but it was clear that progress was minimal. Desiree's family, left in limbo, continued to press for answers, but their calls for justice seemed to fall on deaf ears. The reality of the situation was harsh. In a place like Jamaica, where resources were limited and crime was often met with indifference, the likelihood of finding her killer was slim. Desiree's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of even the most beautiful places. Her death was a stark illustration of how quickly life could be snatched away, and how trust could be shattered in an instant. For those who knew her, the pain of her loss was compounded by the knowledge that her dreams of film school, of making a name for herself in the world, would never be realized. Taylor Rankine, a 26-year-old adventurer from Ontario, Canada, had long dreamed of cliff diving and carefully planned his vacation to Negril, Jamaica, known for its stunning cliffs and crystal-clear waters. Negril's dramatic coastline and vibrant atmosphere made it a paradise for thrill-seekers eager to test their limits against the backdrop of the Caribbean Sea. On a bright azure day, Taylor and his friends spent the morning at 7 Mile Beach, enjoying the sun and warm waters. By afternoon, they headed to the iconic cliffs, famed for their breathtaking views and varying heights. While popular among locals and tourists, the cliffs were notorious for hidden underwater hazards, posing risks even to experienced divers. Having researched and practiced diving techniques, Taylor felt excitement and apprehension as he approached one of the higher jumping points. The views were spectacular, but the height was daunting. He took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the steps needed for a safe dive. Precision in speed, form, and timing was crucial to avoid disaster. With his friends cheering him on, Taylor prepared to jump. Balancing excitement with nerves, he focused on his training and gauged the distance to the water. He leaped with grace and confidence, feeling the exhilarating rush of weightlessness. As he soared through the air, he angled his body downward, readying himself for the impact, eyes fixed on his intended landing spot. However, an unexpected and tragic turn of events unfolded as Taylor neared the water. The sea, which had seemed inviting and serene from the cliff, was not the smooth expanse he had anticipated. Hidden rocks lay beneath the surface, obscured by the crystal-clear water. These underwater hazards were difficult to detect from above, even for experienced divers and jumpers. Rather than being a clean entry, the impact struck the hidden rocks with a force that Taylor could not have foreseen. The water muffled the sound of Taylor's collision with the rocks, but the impact was violent. The sudden jolt threw his body off balance and immediately submerged him. His friends, watching from above, saw their companion's splash and sudden disappearance. Panic set in as they scrambled to get help, their previous excitement giving way to a desperate urgency. Local rescue efforts were swift, but ultimately too late. Taylor was retrieved from the water and rushed to a nearby hospital. A sense of helplessness marked the journey, the situation's urgency overshadowing any hope for a positive outcome. Upon arrival at the hospital, medical personnel worked frantically to save him. But despite their best efforts, Taylor was pronounced dead. The extent of his injuries, including the severe trauma from the impact with the hidden rocks, was too grave to overcome. The incident sent shockwaves through the community. Taylor's friends were devastated, grappling with the loss of their companion and the circumstances of his death. The local police conducted an investigation into the accident, their findings attributing the cause of death to the collision with the submerged rocks. The tragedy, however, did not end there. The accident became controversial when Dwayne Cook, a Canadian tourist who had previously jumped from the same cliffs, publicly disputed the police report. Cook claimed that when he had made similar jumps, there had been no rocks in the area where Taylor had jumped. He suggested that Taylor's death might have resulted from an issue with the dive itself, perhaps a miscalculation or a problem with his technique, rather than the presence of hidden rocks. Cook's claims introduced an additional layer of complexity to the already painful situation. His assertions raised questions about the safety of the cliff diving spots and the accuracy of the local authorities' findings. The debate over the actual cause of Taylor's death sparked discussions about the inherent dangers of cliff diving and the need for more extraordinary safety measures at popular tourist sites. The tragedy of Taylor Rankine's death highlighted the dangerous nature of extreme sports and the unpredictable risks associated with activities like cliff diving. The cliffs in Negro, while renowned for their beauty and allure, were reminders of the fine line between adventure and danger. Taylor's accident was a sad reminder of the potential consequences of misjudging a jump, the hidden hazards beneath seemingly inviting waters, and the critical importance of safety and preparedness in extreme sports. Barbara Scott Jones, a vibrant woman from Yorkshire, England, moved to Jamaica with dreams of a perfect life. After marrying local man Delroy Scott, her days were filled with sunlit beaches and reggae rhythms. However, her fairy tale began to unravel after their divorce. Determined to start anew, Barbara focused on renovating her Jamaican home in Somerton, aiming to return to England. During this transition, she grew close to Omar Reed, a 30-year-old local hired for the renovations. Their professional relationship evolved into a complex personal one, adding to the complications in Barbara's life. By late 2004, Barbara was amid a significant life change. She was preparing to leave Jamaica and return to England, a decision that involved more than just physical relocation. It marked the end of an era in her life. Amidst packing and overseeing the renovation work, Barbara ended her relationship with Reed. The decision to terminate their affair added tension to an already turbulent period in her life. The finality of her departure and the emotional strain of their breakup created an atmosphere ripe for conflict. On December 14th, Barbara Scott Jones was reported missing. Her absence was alarming, given her usual routine of regular communication with her family in England. Her daughter, Miss Yildiz Jones, became increasingly concerned after failing to reach her mother for over 10 days. Barbara, known for staying in touch consistently, had yet to respond to numerous phone calls and messages. The silence was unusual and troubling. Miss Yildiz Jones's concern deepened when she finally spoke with Omar Reed. Reed, who was supposed to be a caretaker and worker at the home, informed her that Barbara had left with another man and would return in a few days. The explanation seemed inconsistent with Barbara's character and their established communication patterns. The alarm bells rang louder. Something was not right. The Jamaican police began their investigation, initially grappling with the complexities of Barbara's personal life. The investigation revealed that Reed had a history of involvement with Barbara, casting him as a critical figure in the case. The pathologist report disclosed that Barbara had suffered blunt trauma to the head, resulting in a fractured skull. The brutality of the attack indicated a violent confrontation. As the investigation unfolded, Reed became the prime suspect. Barbara's body was discovered in a septic tank at her Somerton property. The tank had been hastily sealed with cement to conceal the crime. Her body, stripped to her underwear, was a grim testament to the violence that had ended her life. The discovery was shocking, a brutal conclusion to a life that had once been filled with hope and promise. Barbara's family initially responded with disbelief and denial. They maintained that Reed was merely a worker and had no intimate involvement with Barbara. They insisted there was no evidence of a romantic relationship and portrayed Reed as a simple caretaker. However, local reports and police investigations painted a different picture. District Constable Rosemary Armstrong stated that Barbara and Reed were often seen together, and their relationship had been widely known in the community. The circumstances surrounding Barbara's murder left many questions unanswered. The motive behind the crime remained speculative. Some speculated that jealousy or personal conflict could have driven Reed to commit such a heinous act. Entangled in a complex web of personal and professional dynamics, Barbara and Reed's relationship cast a shadow over the tragedy, intensifying the mystery and intrigue surrounding their lives.